This is December the 9th, 1987, and this is a visit with Catherine Pitts Cline on 22 Linwood Street. So you were married in the same house where you were born. What year were you born?
1895. And then I was married in 1925.
What was your husband's name?
Grant Cline.
Where was he born?
He was born in Lincoln County, Kansas, out on a farm.
Where did you meet him?
I met him after the First World War. He was wounded in the First War. And I met him here in Eureka. Mm-hmm. My sisters owned the bottle steam laundry and dry cleaning for 34 years. I was in the office, and he came in. He had some laundry, and I said, "What is your name?" And he said, "My name is Grant Cline." He said, "Aren't you one of the Pitts girls?" And I said, "Yes, I'm the youngest."
You mentioned staying at the Crescent Hotel for 9 months. That's a long time to stay at a hotel.
My uncle, Claude Fuller, and Mr. Engels owned the Crescent Hotel at that time. They let us have an apartment when it was closed for a hotel, so they could collect the insurance. So we had an apartment right facing this way. Mm-hmm. You know, this is the back that faces over towards the other faces down towards the Catholic Church. That is the front. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather drew the blueprint for that hotel. His name was Jacob Obenschain.
They lived down across from the Claude Fuller house at one time, didn't they?
Yes, my grandmother owned that. We were all close neighbors then, but now so many new people have come in. You know, they're not neighborly like. Mm-hmm. They've come from the city, and you know, that's why I didn't like Oklahoma. I didn't live there but about 3 years, but I never liked it. And so my sisters running the laundry, they were having trouble about having a driver for the laundry truck. Mm-hmm. And so they wrote and asked if my husband would come. Now, he and his brother owned a little grocery store, neighborhood grocery stores like they used to have a long time ago. I guess you don't remember it. We used to have them even here. We had one, you know, where you go up here on Prospect and start right before you get to Pine Street. Well, it's right at the head of Singleton Street and Teak.
Yeah.
That used to be the Newport grocery store. I went to school at the Little Red Brick. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And all we kids at recess used to go over to Mr. Newport's to buy candy.
Sure.
The kids would buy candy and I'd buy pickles. I'd buy these great big dill pickles. I love dill pickles. And you know, they come in kegs, in wooden kegs. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Newport would always say, "I know what you want for your nickel." Mm-hmm. It was a pickle.
Let's go back up to the Crescent. We have heard so many tales about there being, you know, spirits up there and ghosts. You were there 9 months. Certainly, if any were there, you would have.
There wasn't spirit, but there was 2 naughty girls that used to try to get in. You know, we had to go all over that and see that every window was fastened. And somehow or another, why, one window up on the 2nd floor would catch right. So my husband, he asked Mr. Engels and my uncle, Claude Fuller. We always called him Claude. He never liked for us to call him Uncle. Mm-hmm. And so we asked him if we could nail that down. But they were regular little stinkers.
Did you find their names? Do you know who they were?
I know who they were. you know.
You want to tell us or not?
Well, they might not like it,
All
but
right.
it is that Virginia Tyler.
Ah,
She was one of them,
uh-huh.
and Kai Thomas. She doesn't live here now,
Uh-huh.
but she did then. And they used to climb up the post over there at the Crescent to the second floor, you know. And this one window was so terrible, and we had to every time that window would be up about that much. So one day, I didn't work and I stayed at home. And I saw the young ladies climbing up the post. And I went out and I knew them both. And I said, what in the world are you young'uns doing? And I said, that's how come that window open all the time. I said, the next time I'm going to call the law.
Uh-huh.
But there wasn't no next time.
No.
It went on for, a good 3 months before we found out who it was.
Mm-hmm.
That was where we lived, and, you know, it looks out, well, Kay's Corner used to be
Mhm.
there. I don't
Mhm.
know the people that
Yeah.
own it
Mhm.
now. We could look there and down Ellis Grade and down and over and just all around, you know, out of our room. We had a man that worked on the telephone lines here then. His name was Northcross. He's passed away now. But he and his wife and my husband and I, we used to go down and play pool. You know, they had a pool hall down there. You see, part of the Crescent burned when the Crescent College was there.
Oh, I
Part of
see.
it burned off.
That
And the engine room and part of the dining room in there and the pantry. They had a barber shop down there and a pool hall. And then I think they sold drinks down there too. But I wouldn't say where I was too young to remember about that. But my dad, when the Crescent Hotel, he worked for the Frisco Railroad. That's how come he and my mom was married in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Uh-huh.
And you see, my grandfather, he made buggies and carriages, you know,
Now let's get, his name was Obenschain.
Obenschain.
Obenschain. Now, did he build houses at all? He did do the drawing, you said, for the Crescent.
Yes,
Did he
drew
build
the
any
blueprint.
Did he build any houses?
He didn't build anything, but
He
he
didn't build houses.
just drew the blueprint. And he drew the blueprint for the university, the old building in Fayetteville.
Interesting.
My mother's and my dad, my older sister was born in Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm. So then your mother was an Obenschain?
She was Obenschain, Zelah Obenschain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She married my dad.
Uh-huh.
She was
And-
born in Texas. My dad was born in Paducah, Kentucky.
Uh-huh. And then
But they met in Fayetteville.
Did you have any brothers who lived here in town?
I had one brother and 6 sisters. There were 7 of them. Well, no, I didn't count myself. There was 5 sisters and myself made 6 and my brother 7. There were 7 in our home. My sister, Ms. McBee, Beulah McBee, she owned the greenhouse here. She bought the greenhouse from Poor, and I don't know what his first name was, but it was Mr. Poor. And she lived on Singleton Street,
Mm-hmm.
and she run a floral shop
Mhm.
there for years. But they owned the greenhouse, and it was right down there. It was, you know, where you go down Pine Street, there's a wall and all growed up. Well, they tore the greenhouse down, but there was 3 rooms, a big greenhouse, and a house there that come down right from the hill.
Mhm.
Up there where you come down from off of Prospect, you know, you go
Mhm.
down a little, that right there and on down there where that wall and all was the
Uh-huh.
greenhouse. And then the house was built right this side of it, down.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 3-story house, counting the basement, where she had the furnace and all.
Now, you went to the Little Red School.
They called it then, they called it the W.H. Reed High School.
Mm-hmm.
But I went there, and my teacher was Jordan, Carrie Jordan. Her dad was a doctor here, Dr. Jordan. And she was my first school teacher. I went there, and then they moved us out on the street that that red house that has plastic all over it, and here it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's on White Street, I believe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went up there a year when I was in the 3rd grade, and we had to walk then. We had schools, different places, one on East Mountain,
Mm-hmm.
that point up there was a schoolhouse. And then we had one out here to the standpipe, what we always call the standpipe, the first water reservoir that's out there, at that big motel. Well, it's exactly where the high school building is now. That was a grade school,
Oh.
but it wasn't that building. It was a different building, set farther off the street. But that was a grade school. Now, my sisters went there.
What happened to it? Did it burn?
They tore it down
Oh, man.
because they built on and they built on to the W.H. Reed High School. That's what we never just call it the Little Red Brick till recent years, but it was always called the W.H. Reed High School. And that man that built the Colonel Jackson's house gave money to rebuild and put the high school up on that. He gave the money to him.
Do you
So
remember?
they named it after him, W.H. Reed from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that there was a Penn Castle. Well, that was a real nice house there, next going down the street.
Mm-hmm.
And then that next house, it's been all fixed over. I think it's yellow and blue or something. It's before you get to the the Science Church, Christian Science.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That big house before you get there. Well, that was Colonel Jackson's father and mother's home. It's been remodeled.
Mm-hmm.
And then right there on the corner, it used to be real nice. Are we getting all of this down?
Oh, we're getting all this down, and we'll stop and listen to it in a few minutes.
My dad worked for the Frisco Railroad, and General Powell Clayton was the president of the railroad then. And he was a mechanic there for years. But when he decided the Frisco Railroad built the Crescent Hotel, he decided to move my dad up there. And he night watched for a while. And then after the Crescent was built, he continued to be the houseman at the Crescent. All right.
Mm-hmm.
General Powell Clayton sold my dad all the lots that the 2 houses are built on. He bought them from him and then built the houses. And he worked over there for a number of years, even for the Crescent College. He worked for the hotel because it was first a hotel. And the hotel had their own bakery shop and made their own ice cream. And my dad dressed chickens because he had a side poultry business on the side of his job, and then he hired boys to take care of the chickens. And so he dressed as many as 300 frying chickens. Of course, they didn't weigh but about a pound, all the way from a pound and a half to 2 pounds for the meals. And they had colored men to wait the tables. And they had an orchestra that played for the dinner meal, not for the lunch, only for the dinner. And then they played also for the dances over there. And in the afternoon, they played at the base spring. That was amusement for the people. And when the Frisco Railroad sold, they sold to a man that I can't just remember his name now, but he started the Crescent College, and then later R. Thompson bought it and run it. And then, it was made into the Baker Cancer Hospital. Well, my dad had passed away then, and he didn't work there. When the Frisco Railroad run, they had deers, and General Powell Clayton, they had a little log house that the deers went in. And he gave it to my dad for a wee kids' playhouse. And it used to be over here, but we tore it down. It began to. But it was a pretty little log house, and we had it for our playhouse. But that was a deer house, and they had lots of deers over there in the park, right down below these houses over there, in the front, or in the back it is, all down there, the Crescent old land. The little white squirrels, I don't know when they had them over at the Crescent, but we had them for years. They got to catching them so many.
Oh, sure.
And the streetcars, they come right down
This street?
below there. There's a wide place like that, down over the bluff on Ellis Grade, when you turn down there by Cape Corner.
Yes.
Well, down below there, and it circled out on to Lookout, and come right in front of the Crescent. And the streetcars, however, I don't remember, but my sisters do, was first pulled by mules. My sisters have ridden on the streetcar when it was pulled by mules. I just don't remember now how many teams, but they had several because they had to change, But they pulled all around Spring Street and downtown and on up here past the Crescent on out to just below the Christian Church where you turn up there at that lawyer's office. There at the Eye Man, there's
Yes.
that was the end of the streetcar line. They had that thing that run on the wire up above. I don't know what all they called it, but anyhow, it was a mechanical business. And they just changed ends. They took that off, changed it on the other end. And then they went down here at the Presbyterian Church, there at that Crescent Spring. We had to get off there and catch a streetcar that went right on down Depot Grade to the railroad. It didn't go only just down past, well, it went down to that turnaround there, where they turn around the end of the Spring Street, around, and you go up north and south Main, there where it turns around. There was a big restaurant. The building is has burned down. There was a big restaurant up there on Spring Street where that sloppy Joe or whatever they call that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All of that big place in there was a big restaurant.
Oh.
And Gib Hicks run it, and the Miller, Mrs. Glade Miller, was Hicks's daughter. She was just a baby then. But there was a big restaurant there. And then when the Basin Park, they had a restaurant in the Basin Park there. And then across the street there was a big cafe. Not as big as this other one. This other one was the biggest. And I remember the big grocery store down there where the library next, where that was C.H. McLaughlin's, and all that was all but one room, and one room there where they have one of that antique shop, I think it is.
Mary Ellen Sheard.
Well, that was McLaughlin's, his brother, Thad. He was a druggist, and he had a drugstore there. Then up here on White Street was a real big grocery and meat market, and their names were Cap'n, and that was Bob Cap'n, that used to be one of the mail carriers' grandfather, and he had a big grocery store and meat market, and he cut his own ice out to Lake Lucerne and packed it in sawdust and gunny sack, and it would do till about the old way almost to summer. And they brought in hogs, just whole hogs and whole beefs and whole sheep and things like that. So he had a big walk-in icebox. And that was a big grocery store, and that was right up here on White Street, just before you go down to Elk Street, that big building along there. That was, and then we had lots of smaller ones. We had, we had 1, 2, 3, 4. We had 5 on Spring Street. 5 smaller ones besides McLaughlin's big one.
Did you have a garden for your vegetables?
Oh, yes. My mom, then there wasn't a law. You could have your chickens and your cows. And right over here, we had a barn down there. We had 4 big lots down there. And we had a cow and chickens and a big garden. And right out here, when we sold this place, or that place, over there, this side from my house to the garage, we didn't sell that when we sold that house. And there was a big peach tree out there, and we raised peaches that big around. And my sister and I sit over there at the Crescent and sold them 10 cents a piece. That was good money. And my mom had violets, and she sold violets. She'd make us peddle. Oh, we hated it, but we had to. We peddled bouquets of violets and little flowers like that, forget-me-nots and things, to the Crescent guests to wear to the dances. Mama made corsages out of flowers. She didn't fix them like they do now, but she had pretty bouquets of pansies and all kinds. And we sat over there with them in a tray, and the people would come and buy them. Those rich women from St. Louis and Texas.
Did you sew? Did you make your own clothes?
Women sewed here by the day,
Uh-huh.
and they were seamstress, and they'd go and sew all day long. And Mrs. W.O. Perkins, that used to have the son used to have the, down
on
below
Center
Spring
Street,
Street,
yeah.
on Center
Mhm,
Street. That's right.
Mhm.
And his mother sewed.
Mhm.
She was a real good seamstress.
Mhm.
And she went around to the houses and sewed, and Mrs. Baldridge and Mrs. Moore's. And that's the way people they made most of their clothes.
Mhm. Mhm.
However, in the later years, we had dresses already made, but most of the things was done that. And they even made sheets and pillow slips. My dad used to go to St. Louis because he always Frisco. As long as he worked for the Frisco, and as long as they had the Crescent Hotel, they gave him passes to go, and he went to, and he used to buy it for the boat to make our sheets, muslin, and dress goods by the boat.
How about hospitals?
We had a Catholic hospital at first, and it was down on Fairmont.
Mhm.
And it was, don't you call them duplex? Have two buildings and a sidewalk to go from one to the other. And that was down on Fairmont, and that was a Catholic.
Did you go there to have your children?
No, it wasn't there when all of our family was born.
The date is March the 29th, 1988, and this is a visit with Catherine Pitts Cline at 22 Linwood. This tape is provided by the Eureka Springs Preservation Society. Catherine, this is the second tape we have made, and you told me so many interesting things on the first one, and we'd like to continue today. You told me, you mentioned about the turkey drive from Greenville.
From Green Forest.
From Green Forest. Tell us
here.
About it.
And do you want me to tell that?
Yes, tell us about it.
And my dad had a produce, and he ran it down here in the back of our home in 18 Linwood, where we lived then. And the man, well, it took about 3 days to drive the turkeys over because they had to rest them. And then he had shooting matches and shot them all.
Shot them off. Now, tell us how does a shooting match work?
Well, now this General Powell Clayton, that was president of the railroad, Frisco Railroad, and had the Crescent Hotel built. He got a hold of the gun that shot his arm off. He was a one-armed man. He lost it in the Civil War. And he gave it to Dad. And Dad used to rent his gun out to the shooting match and charge $1 a shot. And they would rule it out every year because it never missed. Anyone it didn't make any difference who shot it. It just always hit the mark. But the year that I was born, that was 1895, the year I was born, he shot away 300 live turkeys. And it was the end of Ridgeway Avenue.
Well, now, he would charge then a certain amount for someone to shoot at the turkey?
No, he just, yes, he charged so much for each shot. And then people that didn't have guns would either rent somebody else's gun. And so Dad always took his over there. And so they ruled it out every time, Mom said. Of course, I'm too young to remember. But then my mother said that they would rule Dad's gun out every year. And we gave it to my brother. And he lived in Hawthorne, California. And his wife was supposed to send it back to us. But however, we never did get the gun back. it was quite a relic, for us.
Shame, isn't it?
But he was the only boy, and Dad died when we thought that Floyd ought to have it. Now, he was named after the doctor that used to live here. And when you go down the hill from the Catholic Church, that big house on the right side,
Yes.
when you turn around to go on towards town,
Yes.
that's where Dr. Floyd. And then he was named Clayton after General Cloud Clayton.
So your brother was named for
General
this
Cloud
Dr.
Clayton.
Oh, how interesting. Well, it was fitting that he get the gun. It's a shame of it. The museum here would have loved to have it.
So, my dad, of course, he worked for the railroad part of the time, and General Cloud Clayton would ask him if he would sleep till 12 o'clock and then go over and help night watch, relieve the night watch over there while they were building the crescent. And so he said he would try it out. So he did, and it came a snow, and it came, I guess, was the deepest snow that was ever in Eureka. It came up to my dad, the armpits of my dad, and he called my mother and said, Zelah, you'll have to have the men, the neighbors, to meet me with shovels and help me to shovel a path so I can get home. And he was about 5 feet, between 5 feet and 6 or 7, between 6 and 7. And so you see that was 4 feet or more.
Yes.
And the men shoveled away because we didn't have any snow plows or anything like that. And they took turns about and shoveled the snow so they could get Dad home. Of course, he shoveled too, but he would give out because there's just one of him, and all the neighbors went to help. It started out about noon the day before, and then just snowed heavy all night long. And you just couldn't see across the street. Of course, I don't remember anything about it, but Mom, I've heard Mother tell it all the time about it, and Dad.
How about summers? What do you remember in summer? I think you told me it could get pretty hot here at one time.
It was warm in the daytime, but it was always cool at night. And when the ladies, the elderly ladies like I am now, would go down, they always had music. Now they didn't have it. They had music then. I don't call this old hillbilly stuff music. I don't like it myself. Charles does, but I don't. But I don't say nothing about it. But we had an orchestra, a real orchestra that played at the Basin Park, and up there in that bandstand. I think there was 15 that played, and they played every evening, and they would play till 9 o'clock, and that's when the last streetcar would come on the mountain. And all the elderly ladies would, and some of the young ladies, because they wore shawls and sweaters, because it was so cool when you'd come around Spring Street on that streetcar, that it was just like like air conditioned.
The bandstand, the way it looks now. Does it look anything now the way it looked as you remember?
Not just exactly. No, they've done a lot to it. When they first built it, it didn't have a top over it, and then to have the piano, they said they'd have to build the top. So it was, several years before they got the top and then built it up different. It was just everybody just went to the park. That was the park, the main park. Down here at the auditorium, we had a big auditorium. They had vaudeville and they had real plays that came here, and they had beautiful curtains and things. They had a big stage, but it was open air. They couldn't have it only in the summertime. And, well, I'll tell you, the reason it was torn down, there was some little boys from Main Street after I was, I was in what we used to call the grammar school, you know, the 7th and 8th grade. I was in the 7th. And this little boy touched a live wire and it killed him, electrocuted him. And they condemned it, the city did, and had it torn down. But it was a big skating rink after they quit, the vaudevilles quit coming. Why then they turned it into a big skating rink, and W.O. Perkins, you've heard tell of W.O. Perkins. Well, he was a very, very fancy, kind of fancy skating. That's Clyde and Ralph's father that started the W.O. Perkins lumber yards, It's their father. And he was an expert. Well, he was just skated like these on television, only he was on roller skates. And there was 2 or 3 other men, but I don't remember their names. But I knew Mr. Perkins because his wife used to sew for my mom. And so she was a school teacher, but she did sewing too. They used to call North Main Mud Street. Well, my mom said there was a team of mules drowned down there one time. You know, that creek used to get up the high?
Yes.
And after that, they always called it Mud Street. See, it wasn't paved.
Getting across that
And that was another thing that in the summertime, we had wagons that sprinkled the street 3 times a day.
Oh, that's interesting.
All the Main Street downtown and up by the Crescent, and then back sprinkled
So that it wouldn't be so dusty.
to keep the dust down because it was dirt streets. Now, I don't remember when the streets was paved, but they was paved after the streetcars was taken off, But they had to take up the tracks and pave after that. But that's what happened, and we always had the street, and the streets were swept every morning of the world, and the weeds were cut out all along the street. And somebody on every street was named by the Civic Improvement Company to keep their street clean. We kids didn't like it because our mom was always pointed, and if the people didn't clean their yards, we had to clean it. And we had 2 families that never cleaned their yard, and we always had to clean it. You had. And it was a law that you had to clean your yard or pay a fine if this woman or the man on the street would turn you in, like you had to pay a fine.
Now, did you have sidewalks? Did you have to build a wooden, have some kind of sidewalk, either a wooden or a brick or stone or
Well,
something?
we had stone. A lot of people just had these big flat stone sidewalks.
Many wooden ones? Did you have many
Yes,
wooden
we
ones?
had lots of wooden ones. Now, up above I think that's still there, that wooden one up above the Methodist Church.
It's the
Well,
only
we
one
had a
left
lot
down.
of wooden, and all down Main Street was wood. Over that creek goes down there, that was wood. Because I was walking I had a friend that lived down there, Plumbers, named Jasper. You might have heard tell of Gretchen Jasper. Well, I was walking home from my friend, the Jaspers, O.F. Jasper, that lived here was a plumber and a real big plumber in town. And I was walking home and I was hurt in a basketball game. And I was on crutches. Somehow or another, on this big sidewalk, there was cracks in the boards. And my crutch slipped, one of them, and went through the crack and broke. And the streetcar men saw me fall, and they picked me up and put me on the streetcar and brought me home. And they had to carry me down Linwood to over next door where we lived, because I couldn't walk without my crutches. I had a big transparent cast on my leg.
Well, then you played basketball back then.
Yes, we had basketball. When I played when I was in the 8th grade and freshman. Well, I played clear up till I was hurt I was second year of high school when I got hurt. And we practiced then, the old auditorium down here. We used it to practice. We played the Crescent College. We had to play outside, except down here at the auditorium where they had that skating rink. Then when they did away with it, well then they allowed the school to have that for their basketball. And we had to walk clear down there, where that Harmony playground from the schoolhouse. But there wasn't room up here at the brick for a basketball court.
No.
We wore bloomers and middies.
Yes.
We didn't go naked like they do now.
No.
Stockings, long stockings.
Yes. Now, you spoke of that plumber. Do you remember any other plumbers' names who were plumbers back in those days?
Yes. A.J. Monaghan was a plumber here. And Jim Lamp was a plumber here.
I believe he still lives, doesn't he?
He's still living. He's 98 years old. He's used to be our postman. He was here for a long time. And then we had a man by the name of Wynn. And then, we've had several since. And then Jones, Mr. Jones, Ralph Jones. And he was a wonderful plumber. He was, after I was married, a plumber. And if you had plumbing trouble at midnight, you called him, he'd come.
Well, I imagine a lot of their business, too. You probably can remember when their first business was putting the bathroom in.
Oh, yeah. In the 1920s, when bathrooms went in, we bathed in a tin tub. We had water in the house, in the kitchen, and we had...
was it a pump, a hand pump? Or
no, it was city water. At first, though, when I was just a little girl, real small, we used to have a man that brought hogs that these big wooden barrels, and sold water to people. He brought, he had these things on, he had made wheels and rolled them in, and they put them out in your yard, wherever you wanted them put. And they called them hogs. They was big wooden barrels. And they put, you always washed, Mom always washed her burlap sacks, and they put over the top. Well, to keep dirt and stuff out of them, because you wash your dishes with.
Oh, yeah.
Now, right here, where that cellar goes under the house, well, that's where Mama had her barrel set. Had a kind of a rock wall fixed there. They about tore it down now. Then when the city put in water, well, you had your toilet out in the yard, but then it had sewer and all. And you had that old chain, you had to pull with the box up above the toilet, and had little outhouses. But it wasn't like the first ones that you had.
No.
Where they had the garbage Scavenger, didn't they call them scavengers? And they'd come around and clean the toilets out,
And you,
and put lime. Everybody kept a bucket of lime in their toilet.
there's something that no one has told us about, and that's the dating customs back when you were a girl. Now, I think you told us that you met your husband when he came back after having served in World War II.
World War One.
World War One. Excuse me, that's right. Mine served in World War II.
Yes, World War One.
World War. And how did he ask you for a date, and what did you do when you first started seeing him? Did you get to see him alone, or did you have to have your mother or someone along with you?
No, the first time that I ever saw him, I was working there for my sisters in the laundry. And I was in the office, keeping the office open while my other sister was out running around. She did that most of the time. And he came in with his laundry. And he said, I have some laundry that I'd like to leave. And I said, what's your name? And he says, Grant Cline. And I wrote it down. And I told him when it would be ready. And he kind of smiled and went on all down the street. When I went back in the back to take the laundry, where we always stored it out on the back porch, so you girls see that there were several back there operating presses and hand ironing, finishing up, and I said, you see that young fellow that was up there? I said, that's going to be my husband. And they all giggled and said, well, you never saw him before, did I? I was always kidding them. And
but you were serious this time, weren't you?
Well, I didn't think about him, but being my husband, but I just said, so they looked at me and they said, well, you silly thing, you never seen him before. And he just smiled when he left, and he said, all right, I'll be back and to get him. So I told him when he'd be ready. Oh, I guess it was a week. I'm running around with quite a few. We had several young people here. Oh, a big lot of young people was here then, much more than there is now. And then a lot of the variable boys would come over. And, just as we said a while ago, people always kind of gathered down there at the park, and they had music or entertainment of some kind. Now, I know you heard of those little hillbilly shows after they stopped having the orchestra, I think. So Hart was in it.
And Edna.
And then they had a little, I think they had some of the men played, the banjos and things like that. But the young people usually just kind of, and older and young both, all just gathered at the park. And about a week from that, there was a bunch of us went down to the park one evening. He came up in the park and began talking to us. And he knew one or two of the other girls. So they said, did you ever meet Catherine? And he said, well, I didn't know her name, but I knew who she was because I used to deliver flowers up to her mother when I worked for, some old maids used to run they used to sell plants, pansy plants, and all kind of petunias, just all kind of little plants that they lived out on the highway. And he worked for them when he was a kid, but he had gone away to Oklahoma and then came back and registered in the Army. And I never remembered him because he was just a kid and I was just a kid. And I never paid no attention to him, just a boy on the working for those two old maids. They were both old maids. But anyhow, they said I never did know just exactly her first name, but I knew her last name. I knew she was a Pitts. And so then he asked if I'd mind him walking me home. And he said, do you live where you used to live? And I said, I sure do. How do you know? And then he told me about, used to sell my mom plants for these two. Killers was their name. And he always drove they had a little horse and what we used to call spring wagons, had quite a long back, and they had that full of flowers, plants. We went going together, and when he got so he could use his, so he never could use his arm only just from here, because he had a silver plate in him.
Had a war injury?
Yes, he was on no man's land and was bombed. Blew. They had to put in France. They had to put that shoulder blade in. And but anyhow, he went back when he got where he could. He couldn't tie. When we started going together, he couldn't tie his tie, couldn't tie his shoes. He couldn't move his hand enough to do that. But when he got better, then he went back to Ponca City, Oklahoma, where he had come from. And he and his brother went in business. But we corresponded, and he'd come back 2 or 3 times.
Did you keep his letters?
I have one. And, we went together 6 years before we were married.
All right, now, I'm just dying to ask you, because things are so different now. Was it permissible for a gentleman to kiss you on the first date?
No.
That would have been just terrible, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. They always just told you good night at the gate and left you.
Well, now, how long would you have to date before it would be permissible, or would you have to be engaged before he could kiss you?
Oh, quite a long time. I don't remember just how long, but it was
years.
Yes. And then he and his sister, his parents lived here out in Greenwood Hollow then. And, his dad was dead when we were married. His dad died the day that they got the telegram that Grant was still living. You see, they got a telegram that he missing in action.
Of course.
And then it was 3 months before they heard that he was living.
I see.
And then the day that they buried the father, the day that they got the telegram that Grant was still living. Well, he asked me if I would marry him, and I said, oh, no, I haven't made up my mind to leave my mother. See, she was a widow, and my sister and I had lived with her, and my dad passed away while he came to my dad's funeral. His brother and my dad died the same time. His brother was out in Oregon, and they wired to Grant and told him, was he coming? And he said no, he was going to Catherine's father's funeral.
Were you kind of engaged then?
Well, we weren't really engaged.
You were just going steady.
My dad was a Kentucky man. Grant would come to see me on Saturday night, and my dad never did like it. But he really didn't care very much for Grant. But all the girls and my sisters and my mom and my grandmother, they thought he was just wonderful. He was so good to them. We just corresponded most of the time. However, he come about 3 times a year back to see me. I was married in my home because our pastor was out of town. And I didn't want to go to the Methodist church to be married and be in a Baptist.
Uh-huh.
And I was reared in the Baptist church. So I was married by a Methodist preacher, but it's not like was to be go,
With the old saying that it was bad luck for a groom to see the bride the day of the wedding in her dress, was that saying true then or not?
We couldn't see the bride till she was walked in to get married. That's bad luck, they said. But we just had a home wedding, and then we didn't have a reception. We just had a dinner, family dinner.
And that would have been in the house next door to this.
I was born and married in the same house.
The same house.
We went to 3 weeks on a honeymoon. We went all through Kansas and Oklahoma.
By car or
On car. We had a coupe Dodge. One of those little built-up one-seat, what they call a coupe.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Grant had. We stayed at hotels, and we stayed at people we knew. To Oklahoma City, we had some friends. And Tulsa, we had some friends. And Locust Grove, we had some friends. In Wichita, Kansas, I had a cousin. See, I didn't get married till I was 28. And Grant was 31. But when I had this typhoid fever, I guess or not typhoid fever, when I had my operation for appendix, I was awful bad. Oh, I got a letter from him every day. And then I had a acute attack, and I had to be operated on right away. And he used to send me candy. So my doctor used to come and he'd say, "You got any of that candy left?" Really, he ate more of the candy than I did. Of course, I was just a working girl, just didn't make like they do now, money, My hospital bill and all wasn't like it is now, but I had saved up some money, and I wanted a new coat so bad. I wanted me a new coat. And at Christmas, he went down, and we had Walker Brothers. And the real Walkers, the family of Walkers run it. Ernest and Floyd and Digby owned it. So Grant went in, and he said to May Tucker was the clerk, and we were very dear friends with May Tucker. And he said, "May, I want the prettiest coat you got in this store." And May said, "Oh, you want it for your mother or sister?" He said, "No, I want it for a girlfriend of mine." And she didn't think about him wanting a coat for me, But I had always said, well, you see where my coat money went to, this operation. And he just smiled. He never talked too much, only he was quite a cut-up, but he never said a word, but he just went right down, and he got me this little short plush coat. It was black and tan, when they used to have the big wide tan and the wide tan cuffs and the collar tan and the other black. Oh, I thought it was the prettiest thing I ever had. And really then, I guess it really made me feel like that he would really be the man for